Hi everybody, I'm back. Sorry it's been a bit of a while since my last video, but honestly it's because of this damn thing here, The House by Bentley Little, published in 1999. Let me do what I usually do by beginning with the cover art, which I really like, even though it's very generic. It's basically just the standard old house with the single light up in the tower, the spike rusty fence, overgrown garden, but it's the color scheme that I love about this. This is my favorite color scheme for horror cover arts, the kind of gaudy blood red for the title, and then these hues of blue and black. Just to give a comparison, I'm going to show now two of my very, very favorite cover arts of all time, and you'll see that they use the same color scheme. Stephen King's Christine, again with the red for the title and the blues and black, and The Dark Half, also by Stephen King. So that's one of the reasons why I really like this cover art. It attracts me from a color point of view, but I also just like the house. I mean, you can never go wrong with a full moon behind a creepy house at night. As for the story, here's the back, which I'll read. It says, "Between heaven and hell stands only one thing, the house. 5 strangers are about to discover that they share a dark bond, a haunted childhood, a shocking secret, a memory of the houses they lived in, each one eerily identical to the next. From the remote foothills of the west to the green lawns of sunny suburbia, they are returning, to the past, to the unspeakable events they long to forget, to the house. And their journeys are about to converge in one terrifying challenge to confront their nightmares, or be trapped inside them forever." It sounds great, doesn't it? And it looks great. Unfortunately, it's all downhill from there. From the second you turn to page 1, it is a downward spiral. This was not a good book. It came immediately after the last book I reviewed, The Store. The Store is a very good book. This one, not so much. Now, as I said in that review and in the introduction video I made for Bentley Little, his books fall into 2 categories. Category 1 is the social satire stuff, to which The Mailman and The Store belong, the previous 2 books I've reviewed. Category 2 is everything else. It's all of his other horror novels where he's not commenting on any kind of aspect of society. He's just trying to write horror stories. And in my experience, all of his worst books fall into category 2. This is one of his worst books, not his very worst, believe it or not, but it's getting there. Why do I not recommend this? It fails for me. It fails on the two most important fronts, story and character. I'm going to begin with the characters, and then, because I'm going to be spoiling this a little bit, so I'll get as much non-spoiler stuff out of the way, and then I'll get into the story a little later. Well, the characters are completely without character. That's the main problem here. They have no personality. There's 5 of them, 4 guys, 1 woman. And I finished it last night. I couldn't tell you a thing almost about them. I've no idea how old any of them are. He never even bothers to try and describe how they look, so I can't picture them in my mind. They're distinguished only by their names. I mean, he tries in the first few chapters to give them some kind of distinguishing features, but again, as I've said before, they're just bits and pieces of himself. I mean, Bentley Little. One of the guys, he's into movies, and they're the exact same kinds of movies that Bentley Little writes about in his other novels, because they're the films he likes. Lauren, the woman, she's into 1970s progressive rock music. Of course she is, because Bentley Little is. And that's it. I mean, that's the extent of the characterization. It's just what they like and what petty things annoy them. And that comes off as kind of Bentley Little score settling. For example, I marked one example of that near the beginning when one of the characters is having some kind of interview. And it's a small thing, but it just annoyed me, and it's indicative of what's lacking in the characterization of this book. Here it says, the president of the company was one of those men who tried too hard to be jovial and just one of the guys, and who referred to himself in company literature as W.L. Bud Williams. Right, the next line. Daniel hated men with nicknames, and he hated men who used only their initials even more. That's a bit extreme, don't you think, to hate people who use nicknames? But okay, if that's somehow relevant to the character, you felt you had to mention that, then all right, but is it supposed to tell us something about him? Is this going to at all be relevant later? Of all the million things it would have been nice to know about Daniel as we're being introduced to him, that's literally the one thing you're giving us? presumably because on the morning Bentley Little wrote that chapter, he had a run-in with some douchebag who used a nickname, and he annoyed him, so Bentley Little decided to get it off his chest. But I mean, that's the thing. Not only do the characters have no character, but what minuscule character they do have, it isn't discovered, it's told to you. It's like, so-and-so likes this, but doesn't like that. Or so-and-so is insert 3 adjectives of personality, but isn't insert 3 more. And now that's not characterization. That's not building a character. You characterize by showing, not telling. You place people in scenarios and the reader forms their own opinion of them from how they behave and respond in those scenarios. You don't just say, for example, Daniel was a brave man. If it's an important feature of his character that he is brave, then you create a situation that illustrates that. Like I said, I can't tell you a thing about how any of these people look. I can't tell you anything about what distinguishes them from one another other than their names. So yeah, the characters are very, very weak. And in a book like this, structured like this, that's a problem because it follows a similar structure to Stephen King's It. One chapter will deal with one character, and then the next chapter will jump, and then we basically follow all 5 characters in sequence. Same thing that Stephen King did in It, when one chapter would be devoted to Ben Hanscom, and then Bill Denborough, then Eddie Kaspbrak, then Beverly Marsh. But he can do that because King is exceptional at characterization. He is brilliant at drawing fully fleshed out 3D relatable characters. Little cannot do that. Characterization is his weakest point as a writer. He is incredibly limited in the types of characters he's able to create. And that's why his most successful books, unusually for a horror writer, I found his most successful novels to be the ones that are written in the first person. Because it's only one character, and he can just about handle that. And the one character is always just himself, and he knows himself. Books like I'm thinking about a book like The Ignored, one of his masterpieces. Or the social satire stuff, where we generally follow just one character and his family. But in a book like this, where he's trying to handle 5, 6, 7 people, it's not in him to do it, because he can't create characters that are something other than himself. And that's why it doesn't matter what the name is, what the gender is, it will almost always just be someone who loves prog rock music, who's into arty horror films, and has the exact same laundry list full of things that annoy them. So yeah, the structure of this book was a problem for me, because I'd come to a chapter headed Mark, and I'd think I'd have to remember, okay, who the hell is Mark again? What's his story? What are his traits? And there aren't any would be the answer. Right, well, anyway, so much for the characters. Onto the story, which is equally problematic because it's so incoherent and nonsensical. Spoilers coming up now, so if for whatever misguided reason you are planning to read this, turn off this review and return to it after you've read it. The book begins with a prologue, 5 kind of short stories where a bunch of weird random stuff happens. It turns out not to have any relevance to what follows. Bentley Little just wanted to show that odd things are happening in the world, which fair enough, but you've been doing that throughout the main bulk of the book. I don't think it needed the prologue, but all right, on to the main bulk of the story. It turns out that there are these 5 houses, and they act as portals between this world and the other world. Other world is capitalized with a capital O and a capital W. What is the other world? I don't know. It's something like the afterlife, heaven, hell. It's not really explained. And the 5 main characters, without knowing it, as children, they were tasked with guarding the gates between these worlds and making sure that the gate stays roughly closed. Yeah, that's it, basically. They're all having, as adults, they're having dreams and visions and memories of those houses, and they all go back to fight the forces that are at play here. That's the best I can do. I'm sorry if it sounds like I've just said a lot and you haven't understood anything about the book. Welcome to my world. I just read 360 pages and also have no clue what the hell was supposed to have been going on here. There's one character, this evil child, don't know how old she is, but she's prepubescent. And her evil manifests itself in a sexual way. She's always seducing the adults, successfully most of the time. And that turned a lot of people off. After I finished this book last night, I went and read some reviews, and most of the 1-star reviews are all criticizing that aspect of the book above all else, that it's basically, as some people describe it, it's basically child pornography. It is, yeah. I can't really dispute that. It didn't bother me all that much because A, I've read Richard Lehman, so that kind of stuff doesn't faze me anymore. But B, it wasn't even shocking. It was just ridiculous. It was cringeworthy. It was so lazy how he was throwing in all this sexualization of a kid just because he probably imagined it was shocking and boundary pushing. But the way that he described it was just absolutely ludicrous. But the character of that kid, again, is one of the many, many confusing things about this book, because it turns out that when the main characters were children, this child was terrorizing them because she wanted to chase them out of the house. All right, fine. She wanted them out of the house in order to weaken the barrier so that denizens of hell could come through. I don't know, something like that. But the point I'm making is she wanted to chase them away from the house by seducing everybody. And then once she'd successfully chased them away and made the way that she made sure they stayed gone decades later was by apparently tracking them down and haunting them all over again, awakening memories in them of their childhood and making them go back to the house and ultimately defeating her. What the hell is happening here? First, you're trying to chase them away by doing the opposite of what would chase somebody away. And then, having got rid of them, you then go to the effort of tracking them down just to haunt them all over again and send them back. And what's annoying is that throughout this book, whenever the characters come up against just how nonsensical everything is, they all just dismiss it by saying, well, magic isn't logical, or, the irrational by definition can't be explained. All right, that's very true, but then you're not writing a story. You're just writing things down that happen. There's no reason to get involved with any of this if it's just a load of random crap happening for no sensible reason to people you don't care about. If you're trying to invest people in your story, you can't just dismiss all of its plot holes by saying, it's the irrational can't be explained. I mean, another main plot feature of this book is all these weird dolls that are running around everywhere. But they just, again, turn out to be one more thing that ended up having no relevance to anything at all. They kept appearing throughout the book, these doll things, and I thought, all right, presumably they're going to have some kind of importance to what's happening here and why it's happening, but it was all just dropped in the second half of the book. Never saw them again. It was never explained why they were there. So yeah, the characters, terrible. The story is completely incoherent, confusing. The structure of the book makes it very difficult to follow. This is a hard read. I said at the start that the reason why it's been 3 weeks since my last video is this bloody thing, because after every 15, 20 pages, I would have to take a break. It was so taxing just to read this thing and try to force myself to care enough to go back a chapter and remind myself, all right, who was Mark again? Who is Norton? Who is Daniel? What's his deal? And by the end of this, there's the other main thing about this. I said the character is bad, the story is bad. There's no atmosphere. There's no tension, let alone fear. This book has nothing going for it as a horror novel. At the end, I was left with 1,000 questions, but more seriously than that, I was left not caring about answering those questions. I mean, when I finished the last page last night, the first thing I thought to myself was, okay, who exactly was that little girl, and why did her evil manifest itself in those bizarre sexual ways? I pondered that for 10 seconds and then finally thought, actually, I don't care. I was asking, why did everyone's family start appearing to them again at the exact same time? 10 seconds later, you know what? I actually don't care. Why did that little girl corrupt the guy's son in the one way that was most certain to jog the guy's memory? If her aim was to keep him away from the house, if her aim was to stop him from remembering. Again, don't care. Because it looks like no one else cared. I mean, how this got past an editor, I'll never know, other than they had to meet a deadline. From 1990 to 2010, Bentley Little published a book a year. So being charitable to him, it is probably very, very difficult to write a full-length horror novel every year for over 20 years and maintain a high standard. So I think that, I mean, there's all kinds of clunky phrases in this, which an attentive editor would never have allowed to slip by. Just one example right at the start. One of the characters is described as quickly hurrying away, which again, just one of those things that drew me out of the story. Quickly hurrying, as opposed to what? Slowly hurrying? Hurry means to do something quickly. And like I said, if an editor cared enough, they would have corrected that. And it just looks like the screening process broke down here. Everyone had given up caring because there was a deadline to meet. After this, Bentley Little would write The Walking, which is one of his better books. So 1998, The Store, excellent. The House, awful. The Walking, very, very good. Up and down, real up and down writer. He didn't really have phases of greatness and poorness like Stephen King did, or Richard Lehman did. You never know what you're going to... It's a lottery, Bentley Little. It could be great, it could be awful. So, and it's a bit of a shame with this one because there is potential in this book. I mean, the premise is intriguing. A lot more could have been done with that. Every now and again, there are glimpses of a good idea in this book. Little flashes of the creativity and the invention that Bentley Little is known for at his best. But it's all just buried in this very disorganized, incoherent, poorly written book. So skip it is the conclusion to draw from this. I do not recommend this at all. I really hope this isn't someone's first Bentley Little novel, because I don't think they'd ever want to read another line of his again if this was their introduction. But to everybody else, please do stick around for further videos, because I'm going to be talking about much better Bentley Little books. Right, well, that's going to do it. Thanks very much for watching this, if you did watch it to this point, and I'll see you soon with the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves, and bye for now.